Spells in most TTRPGs are there to make your players feel powerful. But Call of Cthulhu is not a power fantasy, yet it still has casters. And while magic might be something that you want to feel dangerous and overwhelming, you still might want to give spells to your players. So the real question is, how do you do that without breaking your campaign and losing those horror elements that are so core to the game? Well, today we put together 5 spells and 3 player characters to test everything out on this episode of Introducing Call of Cthulhu. At number 5, we have Consume Likeness. Now, this spell I love for a multitude of reasons. It fills the power fantasy of being able to disguise yourself like a disguised person, but it has a whole list of caveats. It has a massive time commitment and a massive cost to it, with 10 magic points for every 6 hours of casting, 5 power, and a d20 sanity cost. This spell is most commonly used with your BBEGs. In particular, it's used with your Serpent People NPCs and monsters. However, when given to a player character, it can go something like this.
The man from Innsmouth has followed her from afar. He hunts her, a woman who he saw use the power of the mythos only the night before, when she, the priest, and the old man were confronted by the horrid thing that stalks the sewers. He knows she must have an answer for him, or a way to break his curse. The one that will turn his lungs into gills, his fat into blubber, and his mind into that of a cold and uncaring amphibian like his father before him. But he knows that if he were to approach, he could be smited where he stands. His face is already bulbous, and his eyes already the size of saucers. Would she even consider me human, he wonders? But he has an idea. He has studied in the Great Miskatonic Library, and he's read the Old Ones and Yig, how his disciples changed their shape to better fit in with humanity. He only needs one thing: a human corpse. And that is where he must make a hard decision. That previous night, when the thing that stalked the sewers attacked, it had taken the old man by surprise. The old man had nearly escaped its pseudopods, but instead had fallen into the Miskatonic River itself. And the man from Innsmouth dove in after him. But as good as a swimmer as he may be, he was too late to save the old man. Instead, downriver he sits with the old man's corpse. The man from Innsmouth has never killed before. He has never hurt or harmed, and he knows that to take this man's visage would be a great harm to those that were close to him. But he also knows that this woman might be his only chance to undo the curse of his forefathers. So he does what he needs to. A day later or so, the old man walks through a hotel lobby, his clothes torn and waterlogged. He looks towards the elevator and sees 2 figures get off of it. A priest with sunken eyes, and a young woman with golden hair, the woman he has been looking for. They lock eyes, and she runs up to him and gives him a hug as she cries, "Father."
Well, there you have it. If your players want the perfect disguise, they're gonna need a body. Which means that they could either dig up a grave, or more likely, they're probably gonna have to kill somebody, which does leave a fun moral dilemma there, by the way. And while the example here is mostly inter-party conflict that could arise, it can also interact this way with any of your NPCs. For example, your players are digging up a grave in order to get the body for a disguise, but they are spotted by the local gravekeeper, or worse, the family of the deceased. Or they have assumed the identity of a cultist. However, now in order to blend in, they need to know the specific words to the ritual. The point is that anytime that you use a spell like this, you can actually create more conflict than otherwise. And spells within Call of Cthulhu need to be a double-edged sword. Using them needs to cause great danger, whether or not it's in the actual casting of the spell as described in the book, or within the story principles that it represents. And most importantly, this spell comes with a massive caveat. The illusion is just that, an illusion. Any keen-eye NPC or investigator can notice the true shadow of the disguised being when cast upon light. And they can also feel the caster's true shape in that of a close embrace. Something that our example PC had not considered. Number 4, Speak with God, the Contact Cthulhu variant. Okay, now this one, I'm not gonna lie, you should only give to your player characters if you're kind of a jerk, but I think that it creates some really interesting storytelling dynamics, so it is worth putting on this list. After all, remember, Call of Cthulhu is a story-based game, so if you're adding a spell, make sure it assists the story.
The priest has lost much of himself. What was supposed to be a run-of-the-mill exorcism for the boy in the sanitarium had quickly turned into a chase into the sewers and a fight for his life. The boy was not possessed by a demon, no, but in fact was a creature that could not be real. It was horrid in shape and nature, with eyes on every surface and made of black ichor. He had only been saved by the woman who had used unholy magic to drive it away. They both had retreated to the church that night, and she had told him the truth of what he had seen, and in so, she had told him the truth of the world. She had been looking to stop a ritual, one that would bring the true gods, these blasphemous great old ones, back into the world. And that thing was one of their followers. Now he finds himself powerless and questions his faith. Over the next couple of days, he dives into the old books and scrolls of his order, and then finds something. A ritual for the faithful, meant to find guidance from God himself. He carries out this ritual in secret, without the woman knowing, God forbid, as she would surely see this as an act of war. But with the ritual complete, nothing seems to happen. At least until he dreams. He dreams of the future, of himself as he brings the old man who fell into the river some nights prior back into the sewers, and to a place of ornate statues covered in mold and filth, and then of himself standing in front of a massive city of God. And from that city rises a shape so impossible and massive that it would drive him mad. He is afraid. But not because he sees the shape as something unholy and impossible, no. But because he is seeing something that no mortal is supposed to see. The shape of God.
The sneaky thing about Call of Cthulhu is you don't have to tell your players everything about the spell that you're giving them. After all, think of it like giving them a cursed item in D&D. Just let that trap lay itself. And when they finally cast it with the additional 5 power, 1d6 sanity, and a casting time of 5 to 10 rounds, you can easily have that PC being an agent of the Big Squid Man himself. But don't shy away from the idea of that character knowing that they might be casting to the full deity either. There are great elements here for you to open up the story for some really good inter-party conflict. Having a cultist on your side or a follower of Cthulhu will give you an edge in the storytelling world, and if you talk to your player about it beforehand, they might really appreciate the way that things are going, or if it has to sneak up on them as an unfortunate trap, it will hopefully turn into an interesting storytelling device. Just make sure your players are okay with that idea in the first place. Also, remember, this game is not anti-PvP at all. I'm looking at you, number 3 on the Bout of Madness table. You know what you did. Also, it doesn't have to be Cthulhu. It could be Nyarlathotep, Hastar, whoever you want to make it. Just make sure that it fits your campaign and the story and whatever character you are going to give it to. Also, remember, they might go insane when they cast this. I mean, looking at any of the people that I just talked about, if they fail, they're gonna take a D100 of sanity if they see the beast. That's up to you, though. You could totally just be like, he's in the shades. They don't have to see all of Cthulhu. I'm just saying, it's up to you. Number 3, shriveling. Okay, I know what you're gonna say. At first glance, this spell seems powerful. Too powerful, in all honesty. You make an opposed power roll with one target that you point your finger at and claim how many hit points of damage you want to do. You then sacrifice that number of magic points and half that of sanity, and if you succeed in the opposed power roll, your target takes that damage. Now, it seems very powerful, right? But then this happens.
The witch stands in the corridor. The priest had drug her down here, back into the sewers where she had killed the thing that called itself a boy only nights before. Now this place is different. Deeper into the filth below the city did they discover an older set of passageways, ones that winded endlessly with mossy green walls and fungus, and carvings of a man-like thing with draconic wings and a tendril-covered maw. She stands now on alert. The priest who they had met only days before had been a help in locating this ritual site, but now he had disappeared from view. Had he been taken, killed by one of the things that worshipped the great Cthulhu below this city? Maybe. From behind her, she hears it, the sound of meat as it loosely slaps against stone. She looks to see her father. His hand trembles, causing the shadows to flicker from the petrol lamp that he holds ahead of them. He turns it back behind them and sees it. It was like what pretended to be only a boy, except this thing took no human shape at all. Instead, it rolled, a mass of dark, putrid flesh with eyes and mouths trained on them both, reeled towards them. Her father screamed and ran further into the maze before she even had a chance to say anything. This was uncharacteristic of the old student of the occult, but she did not have time to think about that. Instead, she bolted ahead of her and turned off further into the labyrinth. All the while, she could still hear the rapid, wet slapping sounds of the thing getting closer behind her. Her legs ached by the time she made it to the priest. He had made a sanctuary for himself and had begun to pray at an altar of some sort. She called to him, but she could tell that he had lost himself to the horrors. A madman that would be of no use to her. She looked down the hall and saw the thing as it approached. She was backed into a corner, and she did the one thing that she thought she could try. She pointed a single finger at it, enforced her will, and gave everything she had to her magic. And then her hand turned black. The beast let out a cry from its many mouths, and its rolling turned into a tumble, then a crash into the floor in front of it. She looked up, dizzy and fatigued. Its many eyes stared back into her. It was only when some of the eyes shifted that she noticed the priest was no longer prey. She felt white-hot pain in her back as the knife bit into her. She could feel the breath from the priest on her neck as he cursed her. She spun around and pointed that same finger at him, but her will was not strong enough, and she had none of herself left to give to her magic. The knife bit again, this time twice in her abdomen. Her vision began to go black as she fell to the floor. She looked up, and the last thing she saw was the visage of Cthulhu above her, knowing it had won.
Now, why did I just tell you that long-ass story? Well, because shriveling is actually shockingly balanced. It's not at all a get-out-of-jail-free card, and while it does do a good bit of damage, it's very resource-intensive and requires a successful opposed power check. So let's look at other forms of damage in Call of Cthulhu, in particular the most commonly used thing, which would be a gun. So most guns do around a d10's worth of damage, more than that if they're an automatic weapon or a shotgun. They all require just a straight, non-opposed roll to hit, can be fired multiple times in a round, and most importantly, the only resource that they use is bullets. Meanwhile, Shriveling requires a single contested roll, eats up magic points and sanity points, and while it has potential to do a ton of burst damage in one go, it ultimately speaking can be outclassed by any firearm in just raw damage. The main thing that keepers need to consider though is that this spell bypasses armor and any magical defenses, specifically that a monster might have. But fortunately, most monsters that fall into the category of magic damage only have at least above 20 hit points, which if you have a caster that has more than 20 magic points, then that's a very rare situation that you are less likely to find yourself in. For example, the Shoggoth in this story had 63 hit points and our caster only had 18 magic points, therefore 18 points of damage because their power was set at 90. But I should add something onto the end of this, that if you have a caster with an opposed power spell like Shriveling, their odds of getting more power and even getting above 100 significantly goes up over the course of your game, depending for how long your campaign is, of course. But the real question is, how did that Shoggoth get there, and why did the priest stab her in the back?
The priest reaches the altar below the city. It is just as God had shown him, ancient, ornate, and beautiful. He knows that the witch will not see it this way, though. If only the old man's daughter had not come with them, it would be so simple. Let us cast out the unfaithful, the voice from inside him says. The voice that has permeated his dreams and has only grown stronger since his pilgrimage to this holy site. Knowledge rushes through him like a tidal wave. He can call something to destroy her. So he begins to speak in tongues and words that spill out of him like seawater, drowning him in their impossible syllables that demand all of his breath. Then silence falls. For a minute, he can hear nothing but the trickle of water from the stone around him. Then he hears a scream. He prays for the safety of the old man, the death of the witch, and the salvation that he would find within this city of God. He hears her steps behind him, the frantic ravings and futile steps of a heretic. Then he hears something awful, the scream of 1,000 voices as they tumble from the heavens. He looks behind him and sees what she has done. She holds out a hand filled with rot, and before her, an angel has fallen to the ground, hurt and afraid. How dare she? In a rage, he takes his knife and expunges the impurity from this world. She holds up a finger once, and for a brief moment, he thinks that he too shall meet his end here. But God does not favor heretics. When the struggle is over, he looks down the hall. The angel moves closer, watching him with its many frightening eyes. I am your humble servant, he says. We must wait for the man who God wishes to arrive. Then you and I may walk amongst the city of God together. The angel lumbers to him, towers above him. We shall be one. I shall follow you. It raises its large, ichory tendrils, and in one fell swoop, he is no more.
Number 2, summon and binding spells. Okay, so the thing about summoning and binding spells is in no place in the book does it tell you have to give them both at the same time. As a matter of fact, it even goes out of its way to say separate binding on some pages. So this opens up for all sorts of keeper shenanigans and places for the players to really fuck up when they are trying to add a really dangerous element to the situation, which would be any mythos monster. Now, I would recommend, if it's a long campaign, maybe just kind of nudging your players in the direction of, hey, remember, you need to deal with this. But don't always do that. Don't always do that. You want them to fuck up. You know you do. And even the bindings themselves are categorized as more simple commands that require you to make a successful opposed power roll against whatever creature you are binding. And then when that command is done, you're gonna need to rebind them. Otherwise, you're gonna end up in a situation like our priest here. Summoning itself is quite simple. These spells require the sacrifice of 1 magic point per 10 percentile chance for success. For example, 3 magic points gives a 30% chance for the spell to succeed. There are a couple of exceptions like Servitors of the Outer Gods, which I do not give that to your players. That is a BBEG thing, holy shit. Also, probably the same thing with Shoggoth, unless you're doing something sneaky like this and you're giving it to your culty dude because he's already made a deal with Cthulhu. Now, Shoggoths normally require an additional sacrifice of a living thing with a size of 100 or greater. However, our caster in this story didn't have to really worry about that because, well, he wasn't actually summoning it, he was binding one that was nearby. Because those tunnels, full of Shoggoths. Did you know? Now you know. Under Arkham, full of Shoggoths. But what about that one last loose end here? What about the man from Innsmouth that put so much hope into this witch just to have that crushed? That's where we go to our final spell.
The man from Innsmouth had been lost for over an hour before he found her, lying dead in that altar room. Her body had already begun to go cold, and just like that, he knew he was done for. The altar called to him. His head pulsed with pain as he tried not to look at it. The idol was an exact replica of the one at the churches of his home. Only this one had something different. A spike below it that sat above a dish. He knew that it wanted his blood, and if he were to give it, his journey would be over. Instead of abandoning his curse, he would give into it. No, he said to himself. That will not happen. He turned to the woman and thought of his studies. He had read of a spell that could raise the dead, but he knew not to what effect. He huddled over her as he began his chant and thought about what might happen. He thought of her body turning into a cloud of glistening dust and then reforming, wounds healed and life brought back to her, them traveling together as she would help him with uncovering secrets only few could hope to find. But with the bitter knowledge that he would just be 10 words away from killing her on sight. And she knew that, or his other secret, would cause her to hate him. He felt his guilt lead into another thought, one more likely than any other, that she would wake, but her wounds would be unhealed, that life would be returned, but the effects of decay would set in. Rigor mortis would cause her limbs to stiffen, her brain rot would render her dumb and unresponsive. The last words left his lips as he wondered if she would even give into a more animalistic nature and attack him right then and there, sinking her teeth into flesh in a desperate attempt to feed. Then he heard it. Breath. But not from the corpse in front of him, but from behind him. He turned around to find her. She was naked and afraid, but otherwise looked all right. There were no wounds. He spoke to her, and she simply replied, "Father?" He clothed her from her previous body, and they began to leave the sewers. She was surprisingly strong given her previous state, but he noticed something was wrong. He asked her what had happened. but she would only respond, priest, or flesh. Then she turned to him and asked, "Run?" "Run," he responded. "Why?" she asked. Realizing what she meant, he replied, I was scared." She looked at him, her face asking more questions than she could. And then she reached up and touched his face. He had been surprised to see the horror in her eyes as she scampered back. Only then did he realize he had been sloppy. The spell that disguised himself was only that of an illusion. If someone were to touch him, they would know. "Liar!" she croaked in confusion and hate. I can explain." She pointed a finger at him, and he knew it was over. He closed his eyes and waited for the end. But it did not come. Instead, he opened his eyes and saw her, pointing one useless, normal finger at him and waving it in frustration over and over. "Why?" she demanded through tears. "I need you," he obliged, "to save me." She stared at him, her eyes filled with confusion, loss, and hate, and she gave her reply. "No." It was perhaps at this final point of resolve that she died again. Not in a violent spray of blood and viscera, but in a soft decay. And the man from Innsmouth just watched as her body disappeared into dust and smoke. And just like that, he knew he was done for.
Number 1, The Return of the Beloved. Call of Cthulhu is not a game where resurrection should ever be free. When characters die, they need to stay dead. Otherwise, the threat of the mythos means nothing. But if you do give your players the ability to bring someone back, it needs to come with extremely strong caveats. Perhaps you use a create zombie spell, but label it as resurrection. Or perhaps you use resurrection raw, but if you do that, you need to make sure that your BBEG has resurrection as well so that they can turn that off and kill that player in 1 to 2 rounds. Or you'll take this example, The Return of the Beloved. You give your PC a chance to say goodbye, but they can only say one word at a time. Their intelligence is halved. And in order to even know the spells that they may have known, they need to make a hard intelligence check just to get there. That's why when this witch tries to cast Shriveling, she just can't. Give your PCs a chance to say goodbye, or finish any unfinished plot threads that you can give them in an hour. Give them a little bit of false hope. Perhaps their halved intelligence will come back over time, and this is just a result of coming back from the dead. Perhaps they'll be able to remember those spells that they can't remember until they make that hard intelligence check. But then let them know that their body is fading, and there's just no more time as they turn into dust and fumes and die once again. Let death be finite for your PCs. After all, the only things that can avoid death in this world are the great old ones. In Call of Cthulhu, there is a plethora of magic to work with. But now that you know what spells to use and how to use them, you also need to know what spells not to use and how to definitely not use them. So come back in a little bit. We're gonna have that video somewhere like right around here. And then other than that, if you are still trying to convince your players to maybe play this game, go ahead and click the video like right here. It's gonna be like right here. Okay, bye.